Hello there, wherever you are, whenever you are, whoever you are. It's me, Adderson, here at the Pod of Many Things. It's just me today. There is no Leon, unfortunately. I am here with our guest, still running the show, holding down the ship. So let's get straight into it and let's introduce our guest for today's episode, where we're going to be talking about new players, ways we can help new players get into the hobby, and just the general thing of what it's like to be new in tabletop RPG as a hobby. So I'm here with my friend Jordan. Jordan, how about you introduce yourself? Maybe talk about how you know me and stuff like that.
So, hi there, guys. My name's Jordan. I'm also known as UninformedRPG. Recently just started a YouTube channel talking about my experiences as a new player to tabletop RPGs, because I am exactly that. I only started playing about a year ago through a gaming club that Adderson was also a member of. And again, COVID happened quite rapidly after that, so most of the gaming that I've done has actually been online, but tried a few systems out, and I've really got into it, really enjoying it. Also been GMing a game recently of Blades in the Dark over on our other friend, the Flickering Torch, his channel, and where I GM for Adderson and a few other friends. And I think let's say we've been having a lot of fun with that. So
no, that game does kick ass, and we do need to talk about like that transition from new player to first time GMing, because there is definitely like a GM drought like in the tabletop RPG space, so we do need to talk about that.
I can confirm it is a rabbit hole.
Yeah, it is a rabbit hole. So and when it comes to like RPGs and stuff, Jordan, you have to understand something, right? When you play for a year, it's like dog years. It's like 7 years, because time passes so fast in the game as a player. As you level up and stuff, you feel like you've been on this journey for years. You've been doing it once a week for a year. You're like, dude, we've done this every day for 10 years, for 7 years. And then you DM, and once you start DMing consistently for a year, it goes from 1 year equals 7 years to 1 year equals 10 years. So you're probably going to make me feel really like old, and like make me feel really good about like, oh, he's so new, he doesn't understand like your innocence. So
sweet and innocent.
Yeah, but yeah, let's dive into like you as a new player. Like, I'm going to ask you some more like personal questions about like your history, like how you got into tabletop RPGs and stuff like that. So let's do that. So how long have you been playing tabletop RPGs, like roughly?
So I've roughly been playing since probably about November 2019. Again, as I mentioned, I joined a local gaming club, which before that I'd been playing mostly board games, but tabletop RPGs, I joined that club because they've always been something that I've been interested in. But as I'm sure you can imagine, one of the difficulties I think around new players is actually finding somewhere, like finding a group or finding a group of people to actually get in with.
Yeah.
And, I definitely struck gold with the club that I found, and I think that it went the rabbit hole continued from there, we'll say.
Yeah, because that kind of segues into what made you decide to get into tabletop RPG. So you said you were in board games before. Were you playing like at a board game club, or just?
Yeah, so I did a lot of board gaming at university a few years ago, and kind of fell out with it after I left. But then, sort of early 2019, I decided, oh no, I want to get back into this. So I found a local gaming shop in Northampton, and then I went down there like just every Monday night, sort of taking board games with me or trying out what they had on offer. And then one of the guys sort of said, oh, by the way, if you want to play things like D&D, like tabletop games like that, here's this club I recommend. And like I say, then it went on from there. So,
Oh, so you heard from the club, for just for clarity's sake, this is Dungeons, Dragons and Other Things, the club that me and Leon met at, and I think I met you once there, Jordan.
It probably was, yeah.
It's Leon's Terrask one shot. So if we say the club, that's just what we always called it, but it's D-Dot. So so they told you about it at, I'm guessing this is War Games Workshop in Northampton.
It is, yeah. So they basically just pointed me in the direction of the Facebook page for that group, and I started messaging some people on there, sort of seeing when they run and where they run from. And yeah, I went down a couple of times just to watch, just to sort of get a feel for what kind of games were going on. And again, when you sort of first go to a club like that, you've got 3 games running, but all with 6 people already, so they can't not everyone can accept someone new. So you have to kind of bide your time a bit, wait for something to crop up, which eventually it did. So I was able to jump into a game.
Don't worry about that. Like, I made that mistake. I was at one point when there was 3 games like that, but this was back before, because I think you joined us in Earthenborough, didn't you?
I did.
Did you ever go to Burton Latimer?
No, I was only Earthenborough.
Yeah. So at the Burton Latimer Library, I was that annoying guy who used to always hang on. So yeah, apparently Craig hasn't heard anything for 5 minutes. What? Oh, this is annoying. This is getting up. Why is he? Hopefully I can edit this out. See what happens. He leaves, and then we'll sort it out. Yeah. So when I was at Burton Latimer, and that happened, and people used to come along and want to play, I was the person who always used to go, "Yeah, I'll take one more," and then I ended up DMing for 12 people. So don't do that. Don't do that.
That sounds pretty insane. I mean, kudos to you, because that's an achievement. Like, I GM at the minute for 4 people, and that's hard enough.
Yeah. So, biding your time, because also as well, that would be intimidating. That would be intimidating for new players, and like, I am surprised that I managed to keep new players age long enough to stay with that.
Yeah,
because I was like, definitely not gonna. But yeah, like, so you started playing at the club, so that's where you first started playing, and you started playing with us in Earthenborough. In terms of like, and so your first game, I believe we've talked about it before, but was it that Invasion of Tarrasque game, the level 20 Tarrasque game?
So that was my first game of D&D that I ever played. My first tabletop RPG that I played was Alien RPG.
With Sean?
No, it was Chris who ran it. Chris, and he ran that, and that was fun. Like, again, for me, like, I'd never watched Alien, so I was a bit like skeptical about jumping into it, and obviously sitting there with people who had played before, or at least knew the franchise. So I was a bit like deer in headlights. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, but that was really good. Like, I had a lot of fun doing that, and it just was like from there, it was like, right, okay, when can I do it again?
Yeah.
But no, if you want me to talk about my first D&D game, I can also talk about that.
Yeah. No, to talk about, you can talk about both. They're both valid. Like, we're talking about like tabletop RPGs in general, but D&D. Yeah. So D&D is the Tarrasque game, but Aliens was the first tabletop RPG game.
So that was me learning. Like, I'd watched some YouTube series with Dungeons and Dragons. I knew the basics, if you will. Like, I knew how to roll for skill checks and what kind of skills you were involved. But then I was like, here's an idea to jump into the deep end. How's about I join a one-shot where every character is level 20?
Oh, Jesus.
And I was like, okay, yeah, why not?
You got to play... You got to play every veteran D&D player's fantasy in like your first go, because no one ever makes it past like 12. Decided.
Oh yeah, I think everybody. It was kind of good as well, because everybody there knew the game more than I did. But again, I don't think anybody there had actually played a level 20 character before, so it was kind of a experience for all of us. Where it was.
Have you noticed that when you start off with a character in D&D, like first level, you have a sheet of paper, but by the time you get to like level 20, you've got like your own book.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it was insane, because the character that I played in that one shot, I then took to a campaign at level 1. So I was like, oh my god, I can do nothing.
Yeah, I can imagine that was like, hang on, what? Like, what do you mean I can't do what I want?
Yeah. Cool shit. I want to do cool shit.
Yeah, no, I can imagine that was a bit of a culture shock.
That was, like I said, that was my first Dungeons and Dragons game, but that was a few weeks after I did my first game, which was Alien. So yeah.
How did you find Aliens? because like usually like the poster child or the poster children, let's say, of tabletop RPGs is D&D, Pathfinder. So for you to start on something like Alien, do you think that changed your perception of RPGs? How did you feel starting on?
I don't think it really changed my perception of it, but I found the game basically through the Facebook page, because they used to advertise games on there. So they would have 2 and 6 week blocks, and for an upcoming 2 week block, they would post adverts basically like of what game what system they were playing, who was GMing it, like what it was going to be, how many players they needed. And I looked at that and I thought, you know what, that actually looks like, of the options that were there at the time, I think it looked the most appealing to me. But I was never really like, excuse me, I was never really like tied down, like I want to play a certain system, because I was so new to it. I was happy to try anything. And I was a bit skeptical because I hadn't watched any of the Alien films. So I was a bit like, I don't really think I'm going to know a lot of the lore around this. But like, I again, you jump, like a lot of my experiences with this have been, you kind of jump in like at the deep end and you just sort of see how you go with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best way to go with something like this, is just to see, like, again, I'm GMing my first campaign at the minute after barely 2 years as being a player. And that was very much right, let's just see how this goes. Like,
it does dial up to 11 at that point. I did this just to make you aware. Like, you did the thing with Aliens where you'd never watched it. I did the same thing with Leon's Mass Effect game. Like, the only things that I knew about Mass Effect were like spoilers, because I watched like Watch Mojo top 10 lists. Mass Effect always appears on there at some point if you're doing the video game one. So yeah, that can be intimidating. But you stuck it out though, and you're here, and you're still with us. So we've talked about what your first game was, where you first started playing. Do you do anything tabletop RPG related outside of actually playing games? So, like, do you watch any podcasts or streams that aren't our own that we do with Ben?
Yes, I do watch our own stream back. I'm a bit sort of like that. But no, so one thing that got me into tabletop RPGs originally, wanting to play Dungeons and Dragons, was a web series that I watched called Oxventure. I don't know if you.
Oh, yeah. So outside Xbox's D&D campaign.
Yeah. So I was a big fan of them, and they started playing D&D, and I was like, you know what? I like them. I know who they are. I want to watch them play D&D, and that kind of got me, because again, I think from when I was at university, when I was playing board games a lot, there were people there who played D&D, but they weren't exactly a welcoming crowd. They weren't like up for having somebody who didn't really know what they were doing in with them. So it kind of put me off. Say again?
Yeah. We are going to talk about that.
Yeah.
So,
but yeah, I'll cover all that. But no, yeah, then watching them do it, like, this is the other thing. I missed out on Critical Role. I could have watched Critical Role years ago when it was coming out, like episodically. Now I'm trying to watch it. Oh my god, it's so much.
Dude, I think about that now. So me and my wife watch Critical Role usually over 2 sittings, right? So we'll watch to the break on like Friday night, and then we'll might finish it on Saturday. I've realised that I can barely sit down and play like a couple of hours of video game. I can barely do that. I can sit there and watch D&D for 4 hours. What is that about? Like, I'm like, where do I find this time? And I'm like a crack addict. If as soon as I'm missing out, as soon as I'm like, oh, it's Friday and I'm still not, it's Sunday and I've still not watched Critical Role, I'm like there, like smacking my veins up, like, no, put it in there. Like, so
it really is.
It's madness. So because the thing is, I like some of the Oxventure lot. Like, I like them as like presenters and stuff on outside Xbox. But what's the D&D campaign? Because they've got someone from outside DMing.
Yeah, so they have they obviously are all the players in the campaign, and originally they had a guy, like, he's still the same DM, but he was originally in Eurogamer, called Johnny.
Mm-hmm.
He's their DM, and he then has now moved from Eurogamer to form his own channel called Dicebreaker. But like, watching him do that for them, and obviously watching them and how much sort of fun they had with it, because I saw someone once comment on that stream basically saying, like, imagine if like D&D was a Saturday morning cartoon, where it's like, it's not so much like Critical Role, where it's like, again, I don't think anything can be Critical Role level of D&D. That might be controversial, but I haven't sampled a lot of podcasts, so don't get angry at me, please, listeners. But when I see the level of what they can do, and obviously the level of Venture, it's like, okay, Critical Role, they're all professional voice actors. They basically do this for a living. They're just doing this as a hobby. The Venture lot, they genuinely have fun with it, and it's like sometimes it's one of those that come up with weird, outlandish plans, and it's like, you can get away with that.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, because
what I think got me into it is that looking at that and watching it, rather than seeing it as a numbers game and seeing it as this is how it has to do. You have to remember all these things about what numbers to add and what dice to roll. It's just like they genuinely all just sat around having a laugh, and I was like, you know what, I want that.
Yeah. So yeah, if it's not so serious, because like D&D's managed to spawn its own company. Like not D&D, sorry, Critical Role has spawned its own company based around that one product. That 1 4 hours a week, they've managed to create shirts and everything. It's a madness. But so then watching these like nerdy. Well, they used to just do Xbox stuff, but now they do PlayStation stuff as well. So I get really confused when they're called like, outside Xbox, and I see one of them holding a PS4 controller or something. That
they do everything now.
Yeah, but they've just moved on to Blades in the Dark, haven't they? They're now.
They have started. They've like just a couple of weeks ago started doing a Blades in the Dark stream, which I watched for reference. And I was like, how do they do it compared to how I do it?
And what's the crack, GM? What are you thinking?
We're both good at it.
Good.
So, there are some quality characters in that. So, if I may just go off on a slight tangent for a minute about Blades in the Dark. So there's a character that they have who is a leech, and we have a leech playing in our game as well, which is the sort of tinkerer, inventor, alchemist type character. But the character that they have, like the person who plays them, is basically like it's like a sort of, what are the two, like a Thomas Edison and what's the other guy's name?
Nikola Tesla.
It's like he has like this sort of Edison and Tesla relationship going with like he's basically like, there's this other guy in the universe who like always steals my inventions, and he tries to claim that all my inventions are bad and no one buys them, but they're much better than his. And that's how he plays his character. He just goes off on these rants, and it's just brilliant.
Have they got an Orlan Welker though? That's the question you have to ask yourself.
Oh, they do have a cutter, but they're not a Russian, so of course they can't be as good as Orlan.
They can't be as good as Orlan, who just somehow fixes everything and then gets it ruined by everyone else.
So yeah, this is Adderson's character in our Blades in the Dark campaign, where he plays the guy that solves problems. Literally, you earn XP by solving problems through violence and coercion.
Yeah,
and you do that very well, and your very well laid plans get unpicked by everyone else.
And all my plans literally involve, I'm going to mug someone.
I'm going to go punch someone and get the info. I'm going to go get us inside this by punching someone. It's like,
yeah. It's a madness. So yeah, back on topic though, because we do need to talk about Blades in the Dark at some other point. So would you say you've had enough experience in games, or that you could think about it enough to answer a couple of questions about like your favorite types of games to play in and stuff like that, or what sort of games you would like to play in? Sure.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so the question is, what sort of games do you like to play in? But if you've not got like a big enough like sample, you can go, what sort of games would you like to play in the future, if that's a thing. So yeah, what sort of games do you like to play?
Yeah, I think so what I've found recently is that the games I quite like to play in are I've done a couple of one shots when it comes to like Alien, Vampire the Masquerade is another one shot I've done, and they're very sort of like investigation type games where you have to like feel like the game of the game is to like follow a clue or solve some puzzles. And I think because those types of games are quite story driven, I like them because it means that you can like follow, like say the GM can pick some clues and you follow them. And also I think games that like I've only ever GM'd for Blades in the Dark. I've never played in it, but it is that system of that I do like to play, which is that very story driven system, right?
Yeah.
And it's like a lot of player choice with it. It's game like you get to ask the players, okay, what do you want to do now, or where do you want this to go, and they get to tell you.
Yeah,
I think those are definitely the sorts of games that I'm a fan of, as opposed to, I mean, not to say that there are games that are unlike that, but there are sort of definitely games which revolve more around, okay, yeah, we're just going to go here and then you're going to do some combat or something.
If I may, from my observation of when we've spoke about stuff, I've always thought that you quite like games that let you play in the grey. Like, so if we look at like Knights, Black Agents, Vampire, that you just Aliens, Blades in the Dark, those are games where you play morally ambiguous characters with like very dark shade of grey, rather than like your stereotypical like I'm the good guy. Like,
I think that's fair to say, and I think that's what like everyone feels. Everyone has those sort of things where they want to play a character that they think they can get away with stuff with. And tabletop RPGs give you that freedom to just do what you want. And I think it's easier to play games like that when you've got this, like, playing a game. I think alignment is something I'm a bit miffed on when it comes to D&D, because it's like, to play a character that is entirely one alignment or the other, it's like, well, why can't I just play the character and their actions be interpreted by others as what they will, sort of thing?
Yeah, I get that. I use alignment. Pardon me. I use alignment as like a lightning rod. So instead of basing everything on my alignment, I go right. Also, my alignment is chaotic good, and this is what that means. So that's my center. That's like the middle of the slider, like 0. What happens if I go the other way to like minus 100? And what happens if I go to plus 100? Like, that's how I kind of think about it. But I do know that a lot of people are like, scrap alignments, and I'm not quite that militant about it, but I can see why. So yeah, so what kind of characters do you like to play then? What are your favourite types of characters to play? So for example, mine, I quite like to play like multifaceted, like layered, but like diamond in the rough characters are my so like you've seen Orlan, and the fact that he comes across as just like, I will fucking kill you, but then like his thing of alleviating stress is to go help starving children. So what's your favorite like?
I think my favorite types of character normally to play, obviously outside of just straight like race and class, is it's gone out of my head. Sorry, give me a sec.
No, it's fine. I'm trying to load up Google, and my Google Drive's dead. So whilst I try and salvage this,
literally my mind's gone blank. It will come to me, but
we'll go to another question and see if that works out. What about then if we look at where do you want to take your personal tabletop RPG hobby? Like, what's your, like, not 5-year plan? That sounds a bit too job interviewy. But you know what I mean? Like, where do you see yourself going? Are you going to always remain a player? Are you going to be like Ben and only play, like, hipster systems? Like, come on. Yeah. So, hang on, Ben. Right, Ben, I'm calling you out. Here. Yeah, we're calling you out, Ben. Like, I love you, man. And like, we laugh, but you do play all the hipster systems. But yeah, no. Are you going to be that guy, or do you want to GM and like run games? What's Jordan going to look like having played tabletop RPGs for 4 years?
Yeah, I think one thing I want to do. The main thing I'd say I want to get out of this is I do want to just try more stuff. I'm not sort of fixated on looking for that one thing that I want to play for the rest of my life. I want to try new things. I want to see, like, there's new games that are coming out. How do they play? And it's just themes like that. Like, I want to GM, I want to play. Like, again, I think GMing is one of those things where it's like, maybe it's not for everybody, but it works for people who found something that they want to, as soon as you think, oh yeah, I could tell this story, that's my, like, how you GM. So yeah. My sort of 5-year plan, if you will, where do I see myself in 5 years' time? It's just, hopefully getting more experience as a GM, trying out new systems, new genres, because I've not tried every genre yet. I'm definitely not, like, I've tried a bit of fantasy, a bit of sci-fi, but there are still whole genres and whole game systems that I haven't divulged into, which I'd definitely like to try out. Because I think the more you play and the more variety you pull from everywhere, the better you become as a GM and as a player.
Yeah,
because you've got that all-rounded experience, not just of one particular genre or system, but of how other games do themes, or how they do tension, maybe, or even how they do NPCs and that, and world building.
Yeah, I definitely need more like genre diversity, because I think I've played Blades now, which is kind of like fantasy, low magic, really. Fantasy and D&D. Mass Effect was kind of sci-fi, but still D&D. I've played Mutants and Masterminds, so like I feel like it's still kind of like there's always like some sort of fantasy bent to it. I need to actually do like proper, like I think the most weird thing I've played is that Hieronymus game that Ben made us play, and then
insane.
Oh mate, I sat on that character. I've sat on that character for about 6 months, and then I was like, what if that my character had literally just somehow escaped being hung from, like, that's where his white rope weapon comes from. Like, but yeah, so it is interesting that that's how you see it. Like, you want to just diversify and like look at different things. A question that we asked ourselves when we first started this podcast is like how we saw like the D&D crowd from the outside, and like and you mentioned it a little bit before. And we said it was like this secret council of nerds in the basement somewhere that wouldn't let us in because we weren't cellar dweller enough before. And like we thought it was like some sort of weird thing because of how like militant they were. Did you have that same experience looking from the outside in, or?
Yeah, I definitely feel like I had an experience, like, say, I mentioned earlier that when I was at university, I played a lot of board games. There was a board gaming club there. We all had great fun, and there were a few of the guys in that club that liked to play D&D. But again, I always felt that they were never really inclusive on it. They like met at this, like, they were the guys who go to the board game shop and then go off in the corner playing Magic, but they play D&D. Like, they're not really interested in anybody else joining them. They've got their little clique, and it's sort of like that was, again, it didn't necessarily dull my perspective, but it was one of those, like, you look at them and you go, well, I'm not getting in with them. Like, even no matter how interested I might be in the hobby, I'm not going to be able to join with them.
Yeah.
So I just stuck with board gaming, and then obviously fell out of it for a couple of years, didn't really do much, and then came back into it after that. So
yeah,
but I just think it's one of those, like, you think of it, you do sort of think of it as this sort of like, not so much a weird, like, only ultra nerds who live in their, like, hide in their basements can do it, but it's almost like it's a complicated thing. People are scared by the complexity of it, I think.
Yeah.
How, like, I'm never going to understand, like, how to do this and that, and I'm like, how do you just, like, people sort of, it sounds weird, but people get put off by the fact that there's no strict set rule. Like, you're in a board game, there's a rule book. You roll the dice says the number, you move the piece of number, or you take this out, you do this thing, you draw a card. That's board games. Whereas tabletop, it's like, tabletop RPGs, it's like, I can do anything. You, like, seriously, like, there's no, you know what I mean? It's one of those, like, it's almost like that fear of freedom, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah,
just, like, I'm never going to be good at that because I will just sort of, I genuinely won't know what to do.
Yeah, no, I get that. Well, I've never actually thought of it from that perspective before. I always thought of it in terms of like a person perspective, like the people around it made it difficult to access for a long time. But actually, when you put it like that, in the fact that actually the complexity of it and the myth of it, because it is so complex in the outside perception, makes it scary itself. Like, the thing itself is scary, not just the people around, sort of thing.
Yeah,
that makes sense. That does make a lot of sense, actually. So
I think it's sort of it's a bit of both. You've got to be with, like, this is why I, like, again, one of the reasons I started the YouTube channel, and one of the reasons I want to try and share my advice is, like, people just think, oh, they're not going to have fun with it, or it's about the people. But it's like, if you find the right group of people, then you don't need to worry about that element. If the two sort of aspects of it are the game and the people, find the right group of people, and then like you'll learn the game, or find the right game, and then it won't really matter who you're playing with.
Yeah,
so it's kind of like two halves, but you've got to find the right balance.
I do want to pick your brain actually about something that I think is really important, and like sometimes I forget about it because of the fact that I've now been doing this for quite a long time, and it's not that I'm not empathetic. You know that I'm quite empathetic towards like people, but like sometimes I do forget to like do little things that could help people. So the next thing I wanted to like talk about with you and like move on to is like your whole YouTube channel is about helping people like yourself who are newer to the hobby find their feet. So I wanted to talk to you about basically what they should look for, what they need to succeed, and then things that they should avoid, because I think that's really important. Like, what do you think? Do you think
that's fair?
I think those are like the three major things, like things to look for, tools for success, and then things to avoid. And then that's kind of like the teacher in me, like thinking three things.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the game first. When you're looking for a tabletop RPG to play, okay, what should players look for when they're looking to find their first tabletop? What are they looking for?
Well, I almost feel like you might this answer might surprise you, but what I think you should look for is just everything, because you might think, this is a point I mentioned in one of my videos on my channel, is you might sort of think, oh, I'm not a big fan of, like, personally, like, use myself as an example. I'm not the biggest fan of fantasy when it comes to like fiction or film. Like, it's not my preferred genre, but tabletop RPGs are something, if you've never played them before, they're unique. So don't be afraid to sort of try anything, like when you're trying to find a system to play. But I think in terms of that's obviously in terms of systems. Other things to look for, I think, would just be someone who first of all, it's a club that's got enough players, free spaces. But yeah, I just think it's one of those, like, if you do find like the right group to play with, don't sort of be put off because they're playing something that I don't think I'll get on with, or they've been all doing it for a while. I just think it's one of those, you've just got to jump in and see how it goes.
So you don't think it's about the system, that like looking for a specific system, it's about just getting involved.
Yeah, I think it's at the end of the day, I think it's the most important thing. You could spend like all the time in the world trying to learn systems and which one will I most get on with, or like, is that going to be something but whereas what I think you should do is sort of look for something that you are interested in. The best thing to do would probably be find a genre that you think you'd be interested in, or find like, okay, yeah, you like magic, play something like D&D. You don't like magic, or you like sci-fi, play something like 40k Warhammer or something like that. But then just like, don't think about it too much. Just be like, okay, yeah, let's just try it. Because this is, at the end of the day, this is a collaborative thing. Like, no one is sitting around a table, like no one's sitting at a table by themselves. They do have people around them. And I think if you do find something that you find the right group of people, you find the right sort of feel, you can just see how it goes. If it doesn't work out, then fair enough, it doesn't work out. But if you're concerned, like if you're looking for like your first game to play, then sort of don't like just look for something and see how it goes. If it really doesn't appeal to you, then fair enough. But yeah, just jump in and try anything, I say.
All right, that's good. I because I always kind of thought like about like just wanting to play D&D. Like, I was a bit selfish in that, and I think one of the reasons why me and Ben clashed when we first ever met, he's okay with me talking about this, we've talked about it before, like between us, is because like I just wanted to play D&D, like, And it has taken Ben to introduce me to things like Night's Black Agents and how fun that can be, and Blades, you to introduce me to Blades in the Dark, and me to find like things like Mutants and Masterminds and Mecha Hack for me to go, you know what? D&D's not the only thing in the world. So yeah.
And I think, again, when you're looking for something new, somebody may well be looking to join a tabletop RPG like yourself. They may well be just looking for a D&D game. Anything that isn't D&D, they're not interested in. But like I said, my first ever game was Alien RPG. I was a bit like, okay, I'm familiar with D&D, but this I'm completely clueless on. But I still enjoyed it because I had a group of people that were willing to obviously have a bit of patience with me when it comes to working stuff out. But also they were like, people who play sort of different systems, I think, understand that there is not everybody's going to know it that well because it's not D&D. Somebody who might jump into a D&D game might think, oh yeah, everybody knows D&D. If you don't know what you're doing when it comes to D&D, then what are you doing? Because it's so popular. Whereas if you're playing quite an indie system or a different system, the people who were sat around the table probably aren't going to have been playing that system for a long time. So they're all going to be in the same boat. Nobody's going to be there like, oh yeah, I am absolutely a god at this. I know everything about the system. Everyone's kind of going to be that. So they have that attitude, more welcoming attitude, I think, or that more cooperative attitude, I want to say, not welcoming, but willing to help each other out and figure it out together.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you started playing at a club. Would you recommend gaming clubs to people who want to get into tabletop RPGs, or do you think they should start with their friends, try to get their friends involved?
I definitely say that to begin with, if you're completely green to this, give a D&D club a try. Give a gaming club a try, even if it's just to go along. Like say the first time I went to the club, I just watched. I literally went. I just sat, watched someone's game, and just sort of sat on the sidelines. Some people came and chatted to me about character creation and other things, but then you also get the chance to meet people. You might turn up to a gaming club, they're all playing a system that you're not really interested in, but that guy over there, he does a home game of something else, and he's got a space. You can have that. It's like a community. You can have that poke around, feel for people, and find something that might be more appealing. Or again, find something that you might turn up to a club and it's really sorry, we're full, but stick around or come back in a couple of weeks' time, or say we know somebody who's got a home game running. You can that's how you can find a game. A gaming club is a good base to start. Even if you're not going to find a game there, you can find from the people there.
It's like networking, isn't it?
Exactly, like networking.
Kind of network, yeah. So that's kind of the what should players look for. So you've said look for a good base in clubs, and look for good people and systems that just interest you. But get stuck in. Don't get too hung up.
Yeah.
So the second thing if you look at my 3 points, so that's what we're looking for. So what are the tools for success that we as veteran D&D players give to these newer players? Because there's a massive influx coming in with the lockdowns and everything. They've realised that D&D is a massive thing thanks to the internet and being on the internet all day. How do we, as a community, welcome those people in and help them to succeed?
I feel like the biggest thing to do is communication with all parties. I'd say this to new players and to veteran players, and obviously DMs as well, is just to talk to each other. If you're not sure about anything, let somebody know. And again, to veteran players, if you've got somebody new at your table, check in on them. See, how are you finding it? Is there anything you don't understand? Because I understand. I know that some people like to play with this sort of immersion. They don't like to break character, and they like to just stay. They'll stay in character the whole time. All conversation will be done in character. But sometimes I feel like there's nothing wrong with just breaking that and going, "But is everything okay? Is everyone good? How are we finding it? Obviously not trying to meta game or make it too easy, but at least sort of so you're not intimidating people by it. You're not saying to them, "Oh yeah, you're this is your first time. By the way, you better have a character and you better have a voice for them that you can stay in for the next 4 hours." Just sort of like have a bit, just be a bit casual about it almost. Fair enough. If you 6 weeks down the line, that player might be thoroughly invested, and you can go back. All right, yeah, let's do some like full blown role play and let's all do voices and like silly voices together. But initially, I think if you've got somebody on who's a bit more familiar, they're probably going to be quite nervous, especially if they are taking that attitude of just sort of jumping in and trying something out. So just sort of the ability to be casual and to sort of find that balance between keeping the game going, but also like making sure that you're not leaving people behind.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think like almost like so just the key thing to support them is just support by the sounds of things. Like if you check in on them, like give them help when they need it, they should flourish. Because like, I do think that it's something that sometimes we get a bit frustrated, like vets, like get a bit like, oh well, how do you not know what that does and stuff like that. And it's like we forget, because we've been anticipating this for so long, we've been playing so long, we forget that not everybody knows everything out, and then we still get things wrong as veterans and we forgive ourselves, but for some reason we won't forgive other people. It's a really weird thing. So I think that's a really good point.
Because it definitely, I know from my own experience that I did struggle. One of the aspects of the game I struggled with initially was sort of role play and trying to find that balance of I don't know, like I don't want to just talk out of character the whole time, but I'm still trying to figure out how to talk in character. And it was helpful to me to sort of have people just be like, yeah, it's fine. Like I would sort of be a bit nervous trying to talk to an NPC, like have a back and forth conversation with them, and they'd be like, "Oh, I don't really know what to say. Like, what do you want me to say?" And he was like, "Don't worry about it. Just say what you want. Say what you like. What do you think you would say if you were having this conversation?" And they were just, and everyone around was just like, "Yeah, just go around. Like, you know, you're doing amazing, sweetie." That sort of thing. You know, it was nice to have that, rather than to have that sort of someone who doesn't like, I'm going to have to hold their hand now. It was just like no, honestly, like it's fine.
No, and that's good. I'm glad that you found that, because I know that we did try and foster that a lot as a group. Sometimes like we got frustrated and stuff like that. Maybe because we were playing with the same people. When we got new people, like we got a bit like what, like, so yeah. I agree that that's a really important part, and I hope I try and do that in my games. I've never DM'd for you before, which is because that's also a weird thing. So I feel like I've DM'd for all of my friends, even Ben. Like played in two of my games ages ago when I was a brand new DM as well. Like I was like, well, not brand new, but like it was the first time I DM for adults, because obviously I got into D&D via Critical Role and like took it to work with me, like as a way to get to play. Like I was like,
I have heard this.
If I take it and say that it's a strategy to get kids who aren't very social to socialize, I get to play D&D and get paid for it. Like I was like,
yeah,
I'm that person now.
But I think equally that is something that is also important. Is like you said, trying to get kids who maybe aren't very sociable to socialize. The other tool that I think tabletop RPGs can do is what I think is important for veterans is to sort of make people aware and let people know that it's not the cliche D&D player like locked in the basement all day. Like it's not that. We are all just normal folks who have a hobby and we want to have fun with it.
Yeah, that is true. Like, I mean, your girlfriend now like is someone you met through the D&D club.
Exactly.
My wife plays D&D with me. Leon's wife plays D&D with him. Like we have lives and we do stuff. It's not all like that episode. Is it Make Love Not Warcraft? South Park, where they get into World of Warcraft and everybody's going, World of Warcraft and D&D aren't the same thing. But let's be honest, the same stereotype of that is what was had for D&D. So yeah, I think that's really.
I think it's important. What's done this for me as well, and what I hope will encourage a lot of people to try it, is that I have, like, when in 2018, I was in a bit of a rough place, like not bad, but I didn't really have a lot of hobbies. Like at the time, I didn't really go out in the evenings. I didn't have many friends that I went and saw very often. And then when I started doing the gaming club, like now I have like loads of mates. Again, sounds cliche and it sounds silly, but it is one of those things. It's like because when you do this hobby, you do it with a group. It's not like a one friend that you go and meet up with. It's a group of people that you meet with, and you can obviously you're not there to just game. It's not like you turn up and oh yeah, we're now playing D&D. Like you might be 2 hours just catching up, and then you obviously jump into the game. Like hell, I've had 40k Warhammer games that go until 1 a.m. because we spent the first 2 hours just talking.
Yeah, no,
I think that's what's important as well. Like you can find that out of game sort of sense of community and friendship as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what I was going to say. I think that like the people you play with around the table and you form that adventuring party within the game kind of become like your adventuring party outside as well. Like it's really weird. You make friends with these people who you've just pretended to be a goblin in front of for like 4 hours. Yeah. And that was the first time you met them. And then by the time you're done, for some reason you're like best mates. And you're like, as someone with like obviously my social impairment, I found that the weirdest thing when I first started like DMing for adults. I'm like, oh no, these people are like my friends. Like if I take all the social cues that I know and I've learned through my autistic head, like, no, these people think we're friends. And I'm like, okay, like we're friends now. This is great. So yeah, it's
and I feel like that's what's important because again, I talk about my own personal experience being like I didn't really have that many. I had friends, but I didn't have that many mates that I would meet up with regularly. And then doing the club and now doing it online has given me that group that I can meet up with regularly. But I think that loops back to sort of what's important about being casual with it is letting people see you not just as the players that you meet up with, but as normal people as well, that they can have like, and that's important, I think, for people who've got that they might like D&D and want to get into it, but they've also got their friends they go down the pub with every week.
Yeah, definitely.
And you need to have that, like, they need to see everyone as we want everybody to see us as normal people, right? Not just nerds who like magic and dress up as wizards.
Yeah. No, it makes sense, and like. I don't think your thing about being in a rough place is like over exaggerating or cliche or anything. I've said before, I think on the podcast, that kind of D&D saved my life and my marriage, like at some points because of what happened to me and my wife, and like going to the club and getting out and re-acclimatizing to the world, even though she didn't 100% understand it, helped me so much. And then I could bring her in, and then she made friends with like people as well. We just like it helped us to heal like in rough times. It's like almost like therapy, so that was good. I think that it's something that people forget, that D&D isn't just rolling dice with plastic toys. Like it's the people around the table as well. So that's a really good point. So
it's important in my mind to get that feeling across, show that people that this what the community is, because I think that just makes people more comfortable about joining it, which is obviously important.
Yeah, because sometimes you can look on Facebook and Twitter and stuff, you look in some of these like groups, it's like, oh my god, what is this swirling mass of like venom, piss and vinegar? Like what? Like so yeah,
I know which groups you're talking about.
So
I'm in there as well.
So speaking of those groups, because we know that we try and avoid them as best we can, what are things that new players should avoid when starting tabletop RPG, stuff like that, from your perspective? Because I can say loads of things that I'm biased with because of the fact that I've been playing for so long, and there's people that I've met that I don't like, and rah rah rah. But like, what do you think people should avoid as a new player? Like as a new player with none of that, like, I guess, jadedness. Like,
I feel like it's one of those, like, again, I've talked about before about how I do strongly believe in the sort of do jump in and give it a go attitude. But there is an air of caution about that. It's like, don't just jump into a group because they're the only one in your, like, oh, this is the only D&D group around, like, or there's the only group that I've got available space. I'm going to have to join them then. It's like, actually, have a chat to everyone. Make sure that you're comfortable with the crowd before you try the game. Because at the end of the day, you're going to meet the people before you start the game. Like, you're not going to come in when they're halfway through. You are going to either go to someone's house or meet them out in a public place and have to interact with them, have to exchange pleasantries and set up and that. So just make sure that you are comfortable with it and avoid stuff that's just not going to make you comfortable. If people are talking about, like, if people are being short with you when it comes to character creation, like, oh yeah, you must play this character because that's the one we're missing, just be like, you know what, I'm not about that. This community is so full of people who are so willing and welcoming to new people, and I just think people that aren't are definitely ones that can be avoided, even if you might look at them and go, oh well, but they're the only one, and if I want to play the hobby, I have to like join their game.
Yeah,
you don't. Like there are so many more that you could try.
Yeah, I fucking hate when people do that. Like when people are like, "Please play this character because we're missing that, or we don't have enough healing." I'm like, "Well, you should have taken the fucking healer then, shouldn't you, dickhead? Like that's your problem."
We've all played Overwatch. We know the arguments about class picking.
Oh yeah, don't get me started. I grew up in the good old days of League of Legends. You must. You only adopted the darkness. I was born there.
Oh, God. But again, it's one of those, like, people hear stories of like the toxicity around like PC gaming communities, like League of Legends, like Overwatch, and they just think, is that what D&D is going to be like? And it's important. Like, I firmly believe that it is not that. There are so many people out there who are so welcoming and so have so much fun with it, but there are also people that do need to be watched out for. Like,
yeah.
Sounds bad, but you do have to make sure that, like, say, yeah, fair enough. Try any system, jump in, like, message someone. Like, say, communication is important. Actually get a feel for the person that you're going to be gaming with and, like, who's going to be DMing for you. Are they willing to be like, if one of the first things they message you is, oh yeah, make sure you read up really well on the rules. Just no, because they're not going to want to help you in game.
Yeah. Yeah,
if they want you to know the game inside out before you sit down at the table. Flag. That's like, I don't want to be assigned homework for my hobby.
Yeah, like, and yeah, I get that, the fact that some people are like, well, it's a game with lots of rules, and you want to play that game, so you need to have the books and everything. So, the best example I have is there was a kid at the club at one point before you joined, when we were still in Earthenborough, and he was 13 and he got bored sometimes and he did things that he wasn't meant to do, like, and nobody wanted him because of that. Like he'd like take stuff without, or try and look at stuff because he got bored, because they didn't know how to deal with him. So basically I ended up with him and he was like one of the best players ever, but it's because we had to like adapt, and like the people were like, I don't want him to in my game, rah, rah, rah. I'm like, no, it's what we have to do though. Like that's our job. And like, it's his one thing that he does. Like, it's his one hobby that he's got. And I think, like, I know that's a kid example, but it's the same with adults as well. This might be the one time where this person gets to, like, chill out for 4 hours, and, like, with stressful job, whatever, we need to make sure that we're being thoughtful and respecting their time.
And I think we've definitely got a good example of that, I think, that we can probably talk about, which is our Blades in the Dark game, which was that, obviously, we run that on a Monday night, and we took a week off 1 week, and that was the same day that lockdown was announced back up in January. And obviously you're a teacher, we have another player who works in a school, and definitely there was like that moment of, again, me as the GM sort of saying to people, like, is everybody okay with starting up again? And it was like, well, it's like, I can be there, but I'm going to be like thinking about work, and it's going to be so much stress. And I just think it's you've got to be able to just be like, yeah, okay, then I know life gets in the way sometimes, but let's just all come, and you just got to try and make, as a GM, understand that about, like, people have lives. You might come up with this, oh yeah, I've got this brilliant story that I want to play out, but like, actually you might have a guy there that's like, ugh, you know what, I'm not feeling it tonight because the real world is getting me. Don't let that sort of get you down as a DM. Be like, you know what, yeah, fair enough, I can understand when people are going to be stressed out, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, definitely.
And when it might, you can't have this preconceived idea of like, oh yeah, this is how it's going to go, because it definitely won't. It definitely won't go the way you think it'll go. Yeah,
and like,
they will ruin your plans.
They will ruin your plans, as poor Jordan always found out on Monday when this got recorded, when he's like, oh yeah, I've set up this encounter. I want to set up this encounter, and we're just there for, I don't know why I'm obsessed with this saying at the minute, but piss and vinegar. We're like, they're like, let's go get him, let's go kill him. We blow up the thing, we set his gondolas alight, and he's like, I've got a job for you, and we're like, sorry, what?
I set up a meeting. It was a guy who wanted to give you a job, and all you wanted to do was burn his fucking boathouse down.
Well, we thought it was like supposed to be like. Admittedly, we just thought it was supposed to be like a conflict thing, like they threw down the gauntlet. So we were like, they're like, no.
Yeah. I just maybe I misjudged that slightly, but it was still fun.
But yeah, no. So final question, and then we're gonna do outros and stuff because we're getting on for like an hour and a half with technical difficulties and stuff. I don't want to keep you from your misses. I don't want to keep myself from my misses. So the last thing I want to talk about before we do like the deck of many questions and everything is first time GMing, because you and I kind of touched on this in our own chats and I think we touched on it earlier on in this episode, or it might have been in the recording we tried to do and it failed, about like the DM drought that there seems to be, or the GM drought, the lack of game masters. Yeah. Everybody wants to play, okay? And there's the dickhead way of solving that, which is like, well, you need to fucking play, or you need to fucking DM, or there's the thing of like helping players to transition into being DMs, and you're making that transition now, really, when you think about it. So how do we get more players to take on the DM chair? What can we do to help players become new GMs?
I think the biggest advice I've got, and the thing that got me interested in running Blades in the Dark, is just you've got to find a system that you do really get on with. If you look at either a system, or if it's Dungeons and Dragons, either it's a setting or maybe a particular module gets released, something that you look at and you go, you get that inspiration. You're like, you know what? Like I know what I can do with that, because Blades in the Dark is a system that's unique in the sense that there isn't this. It's not like a module in D&D. You don't have a lot like an encounter planned out, like you're gonna walk down a path and meet, these are the things that could happen on that path. It's just like you just have here's a building, there's a diamond inside, what do? But
yeah, it's like improv cover.
Yeah, it's like, but it's still like one of those things. It's like, because the setting, it's like a gritty sort of city, Victorian era esque, and it's like, you know what, if you in your head know how the world around the players will react naturally, then I think you're good to go, basically. Because people sort of talk about, again, you know, the old cliche of players ruining a DM's plans. You have this beautifully planned out encounter, and then they come along and they go, you know what, nah, we want to go over there instead. So that ability to know how the world will respond and know what players like, how NPCs will respond or how the environment will respond, is like, it sets you up for those failures almost. Because a lot of people, I think, again, they write these big elaborate encounters, something goes wrong because you can't, like, again, one of the cliches, obviously railroading. You don't want to be that guy. I don't personally like it when it comes to like, oh, we must keep everybody on track of my story. And I think people do it because they get frustrated when they spend all that time writing out this plan, and then obviously the players don't want to do it. But that's not their fault. That's just how they were thinking and how they were reacting to what you put in front of them. So if you know how do you react to their reactions almost? Like, if you know that in your head, and how because Blades in the Dark is a city sort of crime-ridden, everyone's sort of a criminal faction. Like, yeah, I know how gangs operate. I know what would do. So it's just one of those. Like, as long as you know, you'll have fun with it as well. That's also the main thing. Don't GM because if somebody comes to you and says, "Oh, I want you to GM this new D&D module for me," don't do it if you're not comfortable with it.
Yeah, again, that comfort thing. I think that's a good point. Like the comfort thing. Find what you can DM that.
At the end of the day, you are at the table as well as the DM. You're not just there. Like, you're not there to facilitate the fun of others. You're there to have fun yourself.
Yeah, I know you're not called a player, but you are a player.
Yeah. Like, you're sat around the table. Like, there are some systems play around a bit loosely with what the role of the GM is. In Dungeons and Dragons, it's a pretty clear cut. Like, they are telling a story. The players are the characters in that story, almost. But there are a lot of other systems that are much more loose with it. Like, the GM is just like, they're not giving you a story. They're just giving you the world.
Yeah,
like, they're setting up what it looks like, and then you pick what you want to do.
Yeah, they almost think somebody had a really good thing for that. Like, they're not storytellers, they're referees. So they tell you the rule. Like, so you're in this world, so it will react like this. What do? like sort of thing, rather than like this is the world of this, and there's this and this and this, and you can find the golden compass or whatever. Like it gets like really confusing. Whereas in those things, in those games where a bit like actually Blades, I feel like Blades is kind of like that. Like you're more a referee because of the fact you just go, okay, you've done that. The rules dictate that this now happens.
Exactly.
Like, yeah. So no,
and I think like again, it's not the easiest way to do. Like some people may well get on better with a module, and equally, I think it's important. You can say another piece of advice is GM for GMs play with people who are like, don't just be like, oh, I'm going to do my first GM for people that have never GM'd before. Actually get some people in your game who know what they're doing and can like they understand, because they will know how you're feeling sat in that chair, and like say not to say that they may not ruin your finally laid plans, but they definitely know that if you throw out a plot hook or an adventure hook, they'll be like, oh, I recognize what that is, and then they'll be like, they're more inclined to follow the story, I think, sometimes. But equally, the thing that I did, the first ever session I GM'd, ironically just before we started Blades in the Dark, was Ben, one of our other friends, ran a module for a system that he's quite a big fan of, called Index Card RPG. I think he's talked to you about it before, Adderson.
Oh, the book. Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, but he ran a game of that, which was like a cyberpunk themed game, which is something that he's been working on for a while. And he basically, for a group of us, ran an encounter where you're at a place, you meet a person, he gives you a job, you go off to the location and you do the job. And when I first DM'd, I ran that exact scenario for a different group. So I'd been a player in that scenario, and then one of my other groups, the GM was busy. So I was like, oh, I've just done a thing that I thought was pretty cool. I've been a player in it. So why don't I just run that for you guys? Because I think then you've got that story set out. You know what happened in your game. You've got the place, like the pub you started in, the guy who gave you the job. You know what the job's going to be. You have the basics, but then you can, in running it somewhere, like they absolutely didn't do what we did when I ran that, but it gives you that perspective of like, actually this is what it's like when players react differently. You do have to like come up with a slight different, because they've gone off in a different direction than you did. But because you've already played that scenario before and you know what you did and what could be done, I think you feel more comfortable with it. I almost think like one of those, like if you're trying to teach somebody how to DM, the best way to do it is to DM for them as a player and then ask them to just do the same thing.
Yeah,
do what you did.
Yeah, that makes. We were going to do that with like GM classes at one point. I think we were going to run something and get the new person to run it.
Yeah,
like so that's interesting. I do think that,
because I think the other thing to think about, if somebody is interested in DMing, then they already have the right mindset. If you're not interested in doing it, that's fine. That's perfectly allowed. Nobody's going to force you to do it. But if you're thinking, oh yeah, I want to do that, then you do all kind of have it in your head. Like you have an idea. Okay, yeah, I want to run a particular module, or I want to run a particular system, and I want to run it for the group. Like then you already know in your head that you're comfortable with that system and that module. So you will get on well with it, even if you're still like nervous. You're not really sure how it'll work, but you'll get on because you already want to do it.
Yeah, I get that. That makes. I think we could actually learn a lot from you, Jordan. And I think your channel might actually really important now. Speaking to you, not just in general, like I would have supported you anyway, but I think actually like your insights and how you talk about things like is really important, because we do. Like I forget it, and I'm a teacher. I work really hard at being like empathetic and all that jazz, even though like my brain's kind of not hardwired to be that way, and sometimes I just forget, lose my temper, do stupid stuff. So because of the fact that I've been doing it for so long, whereas someone like you who can offer a more like you're more like me experience for new players, that will be helpful. So keep it up, dude. Thank you very much, George, for joining us today. We're going to do one last thing before we go today.
Very good.
Are you ready to face the DOMQ, the deck of many questions?
I don't know, Adderson. Am I ready?
I don't think you are, but we're going to do it anyway because we're rebels without a cause. That's our problem. We're rebels without a cause. So we're gonna do the deck of many questions with Jordan, and we're gonna do plugs. See the night out. And, yeah, it's been a really good episode. I actually really liked doing it.
Oh, thanks, man. It's been good to be here.
Number generator. Get one from the old Googly. So YouTube, if you do want to sponsor us. Sorry, my cat's making noises. Let's have a look. Let's say I think it was 6 ones. We've done most of the other ones, so we had to make a load of new ones, and now we can only pick from that list.
The anticipation's killing me.
For question 54. So, Jordan, here goes
go
nothing. You've started DMing now. You get to set your own rules. You get to set your own house rule. That's yours. That's your right as a DM.
Yes, it is.
What do you think is going to be your house rule? Your house rule that you take into every game you...
Ooh, that is a good question. So a home-brewed house rule.
Yeah, it could be a home-brewed house rule or like an alternate rule that you'll always use. So, for example, I always use flanking. Like, I don't see why not. So have you got something like that you're always going to use in your games now that you've started DMing?
I think this is going to be pretty vague, but it's something that I've noticed from, again, podcasts that I've watched and how I've watched how people play. And it's something that I think is important, is just like somebody may not know how to do something with the mechanics of the game. So a house rule, almost for me rather than for the players, is like if somebody tells me that they want to do something, it's my job to sort of figure out how they can do it in the game. And it's like, okay, yeah, you want to try that, fine. It'll be this particular skill, or it'll be that thing. You, again, regardless of how successful they might be, it's like one of those of wording it as a house rule. It's just don't think you have to stick to the mechanics. Like, don't be too weird, but if you can facilitate it within the game and it makes sense in the universe, in the role play, then do what you can to facilitate it, basically.
Yeah, a rule of cool, but one step further, rule of try.
It's almost like I like to think of these sometimes as like, if you're watching this on a TV screen, what would it look like? Like, how could you, if they're like say, how do you make what they want to do happen? Yeah,
definitely. That is one of my favourite things, watching players' faces light up when something cool happens. They do something cool, and you hear them tell stories about it. Like, do you remember when I did this? It's not their character, it's them. They did it. So the sense of pride is fucking dope. So
you facilitated that as the DM. So
yeah, definitely. Jordan, again, thank you. I'm going to give you some time to plug some stuff, and then we'll do our goodbyes. So, Jordan, where can people find you on the internet, as our friend Ben of the Flickering Torch would say?
Yes, on the internet, you can find me on YouTube at UninformedRPG on YouTube, which is, again, that's my new YouTube channel, talking about my tips and advice, a newbie's guide to tabletop RPGs, if you will. Sort of, I'm still new at this, DMing and playing. There are things I haven't tried. There are things I want to try. There'll be reviews there. There might be there'll be tips and advice for veterans and for newbies. And yeah, it's just my coming on this journey, bringing you along in this journey with me as I discover what this insane rabbit hole looks like at the bottom.
Yeah, if you ever reach the bottom, you've not even stroked the surface of Kickstarter.
I'm still above head and shoulders above the surface of this rabbit hole.
Yeah. So thank you very much for listening. Thanks very much to Jordan. Wherever you are, whoever you are, whenever you are, I hope you're safe. I hope you're well. I hope that you'll see us again soon or hear us again, because we want to chat about our nerdy hobby that we love doing. See you later. Peace.
Ladies, guys.